While I was battling cancer, my daughter abandoned me completely. No calls, no visits, nothing. 2 years later, she returned, assuming I was already dead or dying, but only to ask about her inheritance. That coldness hurt me more than the disease ever did. I'm 62. A year and a half ago, I was diagnosed with colon cancer, caught early during a routine checkup. The doctor said it was manageable. The odds were in my favor. I nodded, thanked them, left the room, and felt my legs go weak. The thing everyone fears had just happened to me. And my first thought was, who's going to be there? I came home, sat in the kitchen. There was a half-finished cup of coffee beside me, and for some reason, it suddenly felt important. I called my daughter, Sadie. She's 22, and we've been living together ever since her mother left. She understood immediately. I'm not good at hiding fear. We sat in silence, then hugged. She said, I'm with you, Dad. And I believed her. Now she's standing at the door of my former house, screaming like a lunatic, pounding her fists against the locked entrance, while two of her friends avoid eye contact. I'm sitting in the car down the street watching. She's shouting that it's her house, demanding to be let in, accusing the woman who answered the door of sleeping with a dying old man to steal his property. The woman is panicked. That's Mandy, Andy's girlfriend. Andy owns the house now. He called me in a rage. Some nutcase is yelling outside, saying this place belongs to her. I told him, yeah, that's my daughter. He swore. I didn't argue. I waited. When Sadie saw me, everything froze. She went pale and took a step back. You're alive, she whispered. I didn't answer. I just looked at her. 2 years ago, she walked out, and now she was back. Not for me, for the house, the money, the things she thought were already hers. But that's the end. It didn't start that way. After the diagnosis, I quit my job. I needed to focus on recovery. Financially, I was fine. The house was paid off. I had savings. I hired a nurse, smart, clean, kind. All I needed from Sadie was presence, just to be there. Maybe bring me tea, sit beside me when I was too tired to speak. At first, she tried. We talked, reminisced about camping trips and silly jokes from her childhood. I thought, maybe this will bring us closer. But chemo burns everything away. Your hair, appetite, emotions. I stopped eating, could barely move, slept maybe 2 hours at a time. It was humiliating to need help with basic things. Even more painful was seeing my daughter pulling away. She got irritable, cold. She stopped coming to my room. Her voice became flat, distant. Then came the resentment. She was tired, she said. I was a burden. I offered to pay the nurse more. Sadie hated that. Started nitpicking her, barring her from the kitchen, calling her dirty. I was ashamed. I said, enough. But that conversation exploded into a fight. She blamed me for everything. For the divorce, for her mother leaving, for not having a normal childhood. I just stood there. Then she said, you ruined my life. I'm done. And walked out. No goodbye. Just packed her bags and left. A week later, I got a call. A real estate agent asked if I was selling the house through my daughter. She says you're terminal, wants it done quickly. I dropped the phone. She had already decided I was gone, or would be soon. I guess it was easier to let go that way. I locked everything down, revoked access, updated legal documents, put a temporary hold on any real estate transactions without my presence. The agent explained that technically, Sadie couldn't sell the house. It was in my name only. But the fact that she even tried, that was enough. Something inside me snapped. I used to make excuses for her, even when she yelled, even when she left. I told myself it was stress, youth, burnout, resentment. But how do you explain trying to free up your father's house while he's still breathing? She never called after that, never texted, never asked if I was alive. I quietly hired a lawyer, cleaned up the paperwork, and wrote everything down clearly and legally. If something did happen to me, she'd get nothing. No house, no money, not even the furniture. I'd never even thought about a will before this. I just assumed things would work themselves out. She was my daughter, after all, my family. But now, family isn't blood. It's not a last name. It's a choice. I kept going with treatment. The nurse stayed on. I doubled her pay so she wouldn't need to take other clients. I couldn't have managed without her. I'd gotten weaker. After chemo, I couldn't hold a cup. My fingers refused to grip. Nausea during the day, insomnia at night. The exhaustion was so overwhelming that some mornings, I didn't want to open my eyes at all. I started thinking about quitting. Not out loud, not to anyone. But inside, I was done fighting. I just wanted to lie down and wait. The therapist my doctor referred me to was the first person I'd really spoken to in months. At the first session, I didn't say anything for almost 30 minutes. Then I asked, have you ever felt like garbage? Not sick. Garbage? She didn't answer. Just sat there. That silence helped, somehow. I kept going back. Not physically, I was still a wreck. But mentally, I started coming back. Started feeling like me again. That changed everything. A few weeks later, I noticed something strange. The longer Sadie stayed away, the lighter I felt. I missed her, but not the shouting, not the tension, not the constant fear of doing something wrong. Without her, the apartment was quiet. Without her, I didn't feel like I had to apologize for existing. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying guilt just for being alive. That weight lifted, and it felt unfamiliar, like stepping out of a storm. I started recovering, in tiny sips, not physically, emotionally. The therapist asked me to do small things, just for myself. Not to keep Sadie calm, not to be useful, but just for me. I sat by the window with a book I hadn't touched in a decade. I listened to music. Really listened. Not as background noise, but with my full attention. Sometimes I just sat in silence, and I felt peace. I began stepping outside, at first just to the corner and back, with a cane, then without. People on the street looked so alive, like I'd stepped out of a cage, not an apartment. Everything felt new. The smell of rain, the sound of traffic, even the taste of water. And none of it had Sadie in it. I started thinking about how many years I'd spent living for everyone but me. For her, for the illusion of a family, for the role I had forced on myself, the protector, the provider, the constant support beam. But no one was holding me up. I realized I hadn't been living my life. I'd been living hers. Sadie wasn't just my daughter. She'd become my purpose, my excuse, my anchor, my illusion. I clung to her like a life raft, even when it was already sinking with me. And even after she left, I kept holding on to her in my head. I kept thinking, maybe she'll change her mind. Maybe she'll remember. Maybe she'll understand. But she didn't. She didn't call, didn't ask, didn't care. Every day I felt a little more free, not from love, from dependency, from the fear of being alone, from the need to be needed. It's hard to explain. It was like unraveling an old ball of thread, knotted with years of guilt, worry, resentment. I started pulling out the strands one by one. This one, when I canceled a date because Sadie couldn't stand the thought of another woman in the house. That one, when I gave up a trip because she said, "What if something happens to me?" Here, when I didn't take my ex to court because Sadie cried. Years and years of self-sacrifice. Not living, managing, and I wasn't even mad at her. I built that system, and now it was done. Marie, my nurse, once said I seemed quieter, calmer. I smiled, and for a second I wondered, maybe this is what healing feels like. Not just from cancer, from everything. I started eating better, sleeping longer, laughing more. At first it felt awkward, like learning to speak again. Then it became real. At some point I realized I wasn't scared anymore. I started thinking about the future, not in terms of what happens to the house and the money, but more like, what if I still have years left and I don't owe them to anyone? That thought felt rebellious, unfamiliar. I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize myself. The bags under my eyes had faded. My shoulders weren't so slumped. Sure, I was grayer, thinner. But for the first time in a long time, I looked like a person, not his ghost. One day I pulled out some old photos. Me and Sadie, she must have been around 10. I was holding her hand, smiling, and suddenly it hit me. I was happy back then. Not because I had a daughter, but because I loved, freely, without needing anything in return. I put the photo back in the drawer. I didn't throw it out, but I didn't leave it where I could see it either. One evening, I sat out on the porch with Marie. She told me about her family, 6 grandchildren, each different, each a joy. I listened, nodded, but inside it was quiet, not painful, not bitter, just still. I didn't feel like I was missing anything. I just wasn't waiting anymore. Not for a call, not for an apology, not for guilt. I didn't know if Sadie would ever come back, or if she'd try once she found out I was still alive. But that old ache was gone. What remained was a kind of exhaustion, a quiet acceptance. I didn't want to let go, but I couldn't keep holding on. I wasn't looking for some new purpose. I was tired of purpose, tired of roles, tired of having to constantly be something for someone else. What I wanted now was simple, to live a day without pain, without explanations, without proving anything to anyone. Just a day, quiet, mine, free from expectations. At some point, I noticed I no longer checked my phone. I didn't wonder if a message came through. I didn't sit there asking myself where she was or who she was with. I stopped running those fantasy scripts in my head. Sadie returning, crying, apologizing. Those weren't about her. They were about me, about my fear of being irrelevant, about needing to believe all of it meant something. But now, silence. In my mind, finally silence. I kept going to therapy, and one day my therapist asked, "Who would you be if you weren't a father?" I froze. I didn't know. I'd always been dad. My whole life revolved around her. And now, nothing. It was terrifying, but honest. I didn't need to be someone anymore. I could just be. Sometimes I remembered those camping trips. Sadie was little, carefree, laughing, roasting marshmallows. Back then, I believed we were a team. Now I realize I was her home, but she was never mine. I tried to build it, to grow it, to preserve it, but she just lived in it and left when it became inconvenient. One evening, for the first time in years, I went out to dinner. Alone. No occasion, no reason. Just because I wanted to. It felt strange. I sat by the window, ordered pasta and a glass of wine. I watched people pass by. No one looked at me with pity. No one knew my story. I was just a man in his 60s, tired but alive. It felt like freedom. My nurse noticed I was going out more. I told her I'd started to feel like being around people again. Not to socialize, not to share, just to be, to exist in the world as part of it. Not a ghost of something that used to be. We shared a lot of silence in those days, and I liked that silence. It didn't demand anything. It felt human. I started reading again, going through books I'd collected for years but never opened, a few pages at a time. Sometimes I'd fall asleep with one on my chest. Sometimes I'd wake in the middle of the night and not feel that old emptiness. That weight in my chest wasn't there anymore. I just lay still and thought, I'm alive. Not I owe, not I'm to blame, just alive. And then one morning I stepped outside and realized, for the first time, I didn't want to go back. Not to the old house, not to the old life, not to the role I had carved out for myself. I no longer needed some grand reason to exist. I just needed a day, one honest, quiet day. And that's where I began. For a long time, I kept asking myself if I needed anything more. Anyone, new people, new conversations, a hand on my shoulder. I wasn't sure. To be honest, at 62, it felt too late. Not for feelings, no, but for trust. To open up again, let someone into my routines, talk about things like, what's for dinner? Or, why I don't eat sugar anymore. I'd spent too long in survival mode. I was just learning how to exist. Living with someone, that felt foreign. But one day I downloaded an app, not to look for love, just to see who was out there. Everything felt different. People were using words I didn't know. Half the time I had to look up what they meant. I'm not joking. One woman wrote that she was ace, and I thought it was a typo. Turns out it wasn't. I didn't feel old exactly, just out of step. Still, I was curious. Not about falling in love, just understanding the world I'd been missing. I chatted with a few women, politely. No pressure. Some were closed off. Others shared too much. One message saying she wanted a man without baggage. I didn't reply. I am baggage. A lost suitcase with stickers from every failure. But I'm not ashamed. My life isn't neat, but it's real. And I didn't want to pretend. Then I met Sarah. She was in her early 50s, had taken care of her sick mother for 10 years. Her husband left during that time. She raised her son alone. He was grown now, off at college, and Sarah was finally by herself for the first time in years. She didn't complain. She wasn't looking for sympathy. She just talked, without trying to impress me, and that felt different. We messaged for a week. Then we called. Then we met. I was nervous, like a teenager. Picked out a shirt, cleaned my shoes, worried I'd come off as boring, sick, an old man. But Sarah smiled the moment she saw me, said, "You feel real." It was the most honest thing anyone had said to me in a long time. We didn't talk about the future. We just walked, had tea, talked about books. I told her I'd been sick, that my daughter left. She didn't try to fix it. She just listened. Sometimes she sat in silence with me. That meant more than any advice. After 2 months, we started seeing each other more. After 6, we spent nights together. One day, Sarah said, "If you want, we could live together." I was surprised. She added, "But not at your place. I don't want to live in a house where you were betrayed." And I realized I didn't want that either. Not because I feared the memories, but because in that house, I was always dad. Now I'm just a man. I didn't want to hold on to that place like it was a memorial. It stopped being a home long ago. I put it up for sale. And when I handed the keys to the new owner, I didn't feel sadness or nostalgia, just lightness. I wasn't hiding anymore. And I wasn't clinging to what I'd already let go. Sarah and I were already living together, quietly. No drama, no fireworks, just a warm kind of consistency. She didn't ask too many questions, didn't dig into my past, didn't try to open me up. We simply shared life. Morning coffee, silence over breakfast. Sometimes we laughed at the news, sometimes we sat with our own books. I never felt like I had to be interesting, and that somehow felt like happiness. I hardly thought about Sadie anymore. Not because I forced her out of my mind. She just didn't belong in this new life. The past stayed where it belonged. I believed the chapter was closed, but then one day, my phone rang. Unknown number. A man's voice, sharp, annoyed. It was Andy, the guy who'd bought my old house. "Your daughter just showed up, caused a scene, tried opening the door with an old key, screamed that this was her house. Yelled at my girlfriend, said she took the dying old man to steal the house. What the hell is going on? I went quiet. My chest tightened. I'd known this day might come, but not like this. Not this messy, not this low. I said, that's my daughter. But if she shows up again, call the cops. She has no rights. The next day I drove over. Not for her, for myself, for closure. I needed to see it with my own eyes, to confirm what I already felt, that there was truly nothing left. She was standing by the gate, not alone, two friends with her. When she saw me, she froze. Her face drained of color, her arms dropped to her sides. For a second, there was confusion in her eyes. I walked closer. She whispered, "You're alive?" Her voice trembled. I said nothing, just looked at her. Then she asked, "You're dying anyway. Where's the money?" And that was it. Not "I'm sorry." Not "I missed you." Not "I was wrong." Just that, mechanical, cold, straight to the chest, as if I was still just a resource to be accessed, something she used to own. I laughed. Not from joy, from exhaustion, from the fact that it wasn't even shocking. It was too familiar, too expected. Then I said, "I'm not sick anymore. And no, you're not getting a cent. Everything I have, I'm spending on myself." She faltered. Her friends looked at each other silently, and I turned and walked to the car. Andy stepped out onto the porch with a bat, just in case. I told him, "If she shows up again, call the police, no hesitation." As I got behind the wheel, I heard footsteps behind me. "Dad, please, don't do this. I'm your daughter. I'm your only family." I looked at her, calmly, almost detached, and I said, "You gave that up the day you walked out." Then I closed the door and drove away. After that last encounter, I didn't feel guilt, not a shred of it, not even the old dull ache that used to sit in my chest for days. I drove home thinking, now it's truly over. Everything had been said, seen, made clear. But 2 days later, she showed up again. Sarah was at work. I was sitting on the porch with a book when I heard footsteps by the gate. I looked up. Sadie, alone this time. No friends, no yelling, no drama. Just a strange look on her face, like she wasn't even sure why she was there. I didn't get up, didn't call out. I just watched. She stepped closer and stopped at the stairs. "Can we just talk?" she asked quietly. I said nothing. I could have stood up and walked inside, but I didn't. She sat on the edge of the step. Her hands were shaking. She didn't speak right away. Then it all started pouring out, choppy, scattered, with long pauses. At first, the usual. I was angry. I was overwhelmed. I didn't know how to handle it. Then, when you got sick, I felt like I was dying too. And finally, something I hadn't expected. "You were everything to me, and that scared me." I listened, without emotion. Not because I didn't feel anything, but because there was nothing left in me that needed to respond. I wasn't looking for explanations or apologies. I'd already understood everything I needed to. Sadie cried, told me she didn't know how to live without me, that her husband left, that she had nothing, that the old house made her feel like she still had roots, that she didn't want to lose the last person she had. I listened, and I felt the silence between us, not as a pause, but as a wall. "I'm not angry," I said. "Honestly, I forgave you a long time ago, but that doesn't mean I have to let you back into my life." She flinched. "I'm your daughter." "Yes, and I'm also a person." Even I was surprised by my own words. I had never said that before. I'd always been dad, responsible, obligated. But now, I was just a man, with boundaries, with the right to peace, with the right to choose. She kept trying to talk, clinging to memories, to old photos, to the words family and destiny. I didn't argue, I didn't explain. I just didn't open the door again. At some point, she understood that this wasn't anger, or punishment, or a moment of pride. This was a decision. Calm, grown up, final. When she walked away, I didn't turn around. I didn't follow. I didn't ask if she'd be okay. For the first time in my life, I put myself first. Sometimes I wake up before Sarah and just sit quietly, watching the way the light falls across the window frame. No thoughts, no worries, just noticing. It's not happiness in the way people describe it. It's something quieter. Still, undemanding, internal. I'm not trying to live a second life. I don't believe in those phrases. I don't feel the need to make up for lost time. What's behind me is behind me. What I have now is enough. I'm not chasing, waiting, or fighting anymore. I'm just living. And as it turns out, that's not so easy. But now I know how. Sometimes Sarah and I go for evening walks. We don't talk much, just hold hands. In those moments, I don't feel like an age, or a body, or a story. I feel like something simpler, present. Not strong because I endured, but strong because I let go. Sadie hasn't come back, and maybe that's for the best. There's nothing in me that still needs her apology. I don't run loops of old conversations in my head. I don't play the what-if game. I've let go, not out of pride, out of clarity. Recently, I found an old box with letters, unfinished drafts, birthday cards, school drawings. I used to avoid it, afraid of the pain. Now I went through it slowly. Those things are part of my life, but they are not me. They're things I once carried, but now I carry myself. Sarah doesn't ask much, but she sees. One day she told me, I like who you are because you're not pretending. That said everything. I'm no longer playing the role of father, victim, or savior. I'm just a man. Tired, yes, but still capable of kindness, of care, of choice. I'm not writing this as a confession. I'm not looking for sympathy. I just want to say something for anyone who, like me, once felt trapped between love and destruction. You can leave. Not dramatically, not with fireworks. Just leave. Quietly. Fully. No revenge. No scene. I used to think I had to forgive everything to be free. But it turns out freedom isn't about forgiveness. It's about clarity, boundaries. It's about being able to look someone in the face, someone who once meant everything to you, and feel nothing. Not love, not hate, just nothing. And then feel yourself. When I look in the mirror now, I'm not searching for who I am. I know. I'm not a shadow. I'm a person, and that's enough.